bags every day. I don't play, I don't got no time for games. Stuffing bags every day, scooping nose, cause I know we gon' blow out the. My whole squad foolish, only speak the truest. Y'all know how we do it. Rocket ship shooting, moonshot hooping, ripple dropping, know you scooping. Giving back my cup, overflowing like a ghost. It go unnoticed. It's a 3-year delta. When we blow, it will melt you. 3, 2, 1. I hold the alpha, held strong. You a doubter, now we gone. It don't matter. Heard the chatter. Now your face melted batter. Now we up. Metal bat, swinging batters out the park. Went from light to the dark. Flip the switch in the heart. Get them drops. Watch it spark. Taking off. Watching charts on point. Hit the dot. Extra mark. It's that art. Big bags holding hard. I get bags every day. I don't play. I don't got no time for games. Stuffing bags every day. Scooping nose. Cause I know we gon' blow out the ozone and take the throne.
I'm working like a clockwork, stuffing bags non-stop like there is no tomorrow. If you haven't yet, then you will be in sorrow. Professing my love for crypto in my lingo. Mabuhay sa inyong lahat, kamusta na kayo? Makinig mabuti dahil para rin to sa inyo. Please don't be blinded by the voice in your mind. Aligning, tuning in from within will lead you right. My eyes is on the prize, no need to check it twice. And never will I cry about Theriot's demise. Always waking up with love and gratitude. Investing stuff in bags, yup, that's my attitude.
I get bags every day. I don't play, I don't got no time for games. Stuffing bags every day. Scooping nose, cause I know we gon' blow out the ozone and take the throne. Too many bags don't mean to flaunt it. Made it out the gauntlet when we launched my supersonic. I told you about it, you ain't want it. You went demonic. To the moon, beyond it, to the infinite. We getting it. 5th gear, we shifting it. Watch as we make history. Disintegrate your misery. We up on that mission. Read. This was told like history. Disappear like mystery. Too much hate, need Listerine. You stuck inside them little leagues. Watch your mouth, literally. I'm dropping bombs, sizzling. Whole squad, Byzantine. New world, live your dreams. Waking up, you shivering. We on the moon, whistling. I told you what's gonna happen, and it did this thing. Went from nothing, now we floating like we grew some wings. I get bags every day. I don't play, I don't got no time for games. Stuffing bags every day. Scooping nose, cause I know we gon' blow out the ozone and take the throne.
Yeah, Lady E ain't no rapper. I'm a crypto poet that's gonna make you prosper. I don't fear monger. Brighter future is the only thing I'm gonna conquer. I heard your soul is weak. Don't stay asleep, cause you will be a sheep. Unhealed wounds, wounded dreams got my soul waking. I did some soul searching. Really grateful that I found out about the phoenix rising. XRP dethroning shield coins, that's really epic. I ain't foolish. Always grabbing bull horns with my strong hands. Got my soul bullish. Crypto kings and queens. Keep stuffing
I
those
get
bags.
bags every day. I don't play, I don't got no time for games. Stuffing bags every day. Scooping nose, cause I know we gon' blow out the ozone and take the throne.
Digital soldiers, crypto taking over, winning battle, game over. You got plagued like controller, spread a virus to control you. Don't tell me how I told you, hold up, I got plans to load up. Zombies all over, the whole game rigged with that blockchain. And secret mining really wins. Watch that deep state, watch that crypto Twitter trend, putting cash in the trash.
What's up to everybody tuning in? Guys, thanks so much for hitting those likes on the way in. We're about a couple of minutes away until the Schwartz appears for the Uphold webinar. Thanks for everybody tuning in. It really means a lot. Already 12 likes, guys. Thanks for showing support to this channel. We're up early here on the west side. But guys, I think this is going to be a really good interview to check out. Thank you guys for tuning in. We got Tiny Papa in the house, Johnny Morales, Work Until I Die, RPM. Who else do we got? We got Orlando Wallace in the house. What's up, dude? Mr. A. Hell yeah, man. Busy day. I see what you're saying. Blockchain Monkeys. Thank you, dude. No Consent. Some Real Guy. How you doing, man? Everybody, thanks for hitting those likes on the way in. Really helps to get the word out about the Schwartz getting interviewed by Uphold, man. Interesting to hear what he has to say. Ripple's really been on a little bit of a marketing campaign, wouldn't you say? You know, we've been seeing Brad Garlinghouse doing a lot of interviews. Now we're starting to see David Schwartz. It's all the money. Hell yeah, man. Let's see what little breadcrumbs we can get out of this interview. We are about 2 minutes away. 2 minutes away. Thanks for smashing that like. 14 likes already, guys. Hell yeah. Get that reach out there, man. Let people know. The Schwartz man is going to be speaking. Alright, I'm going to go back to the music here. Let the Bagman play for the rest of the time. I'll see you guys soon. Alrighty.
Watch us soul, watch us sit. We finally made it all in tears. I hope you hold no volunteers. No more FUD, no more fear. We the crypto pioneers. It's a ghost town. I know you ghost now. Watch us float now like a ghost you spook. Wow. Bags got that bullet sound. Know it's clear now. We just waiting to be crowned. We got zero doubt. No fear of missing out.
To Robin, which is a huge upgrade in terms of looks and personality. And I'm just popping in for a second to show that I'm such an admirer of David Schwartz that it's taken me all of COVID to get my hair to look a little like his. I'm almost there. Maybe by the time this thing's done, I'll actually achieve it. So with that, I'll hand over to Robin.
Great. Well, thank you, JP, and sorry to hear that you're in the hospital, and hope everything goes well with your family. So with that, no further introduction is required, I think, for David Schwartz. He's really the main event here. This is an Uphold webinar that we've been long time partners, et cetera, with Ripple, and we would love to dive into XRP and what's going on there, and there's no better person than David Schwartz, the CTO of Ripple, to dive in there. So first of all, David, welcome. Hope everything is good on your side and everyone's healthy, and that you've been managing okay during this tough time. What I was hoping you could do is just start us off with a little bit of history about yourself. First of all, obviously most people know who you are, but just a little bit of background, and then dive into kind of the origins of XRP and what is its mission, and what current developments are taking place with XRP. So with that, I'll turn the mic over to you, and we'll get started.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I'm doing well. My family's doing well. So I kind of have to teleport you back to 2011 when Jed McCaleb and I first started thinking about starting a new project. And it's hard to kind of put your head, because cryptocurrency and technology changed so quickly. It's very hard to understand like how people thought about cryptocurrency back then, because it's so different from what it was now. But I would say two thoughts that really crystallized in our minds. One of them was proof of work in most people's mind was cryptocurrency, was blockchain. There was no other technology. People sometimes thought that like the unobtainium in Bitcoin, the thing that made Bitcoin so great, was its proof of work. Some people still think that today, but it was pretty much universal back then. And I think the other, there were a couple of views that today sound very naive. One of them was that like proof of work would make everybody rich, and anyone who had any extra computing power would just mine some Bitcoin and they would make money. Now, obviously, that's economically naive. Today, someone has to have the cheapest computers, someone has to have the cheapest electrical power, and so they'll sort of push everybody out. But we didn't really realize that back then. And I think the other thing was we sort of thought Bitcoin was so great, everybody would use it for everything, and so there wouldn't be an interoperability problem. And of course, today that sounds incredibly naive, but back then that was a plausible like argument to make. And it's like a religion that says that there'd be world peace if everybody believed that religion. Like that's true of every religion, right? Like every religion, if everybody agreed on it, like there wouldn't be religious wars or anything. And it's kind of a similar thing that like even if like what we soon realized was that even if Bitcoin was going to take over the world and everybody was going to use Bitcoin for everything in the future, you still have to get there from here. Like 100% of the world's value wasn't in Bitcoin back then. And so you need bridges, not walls. You need like connectivity. So when we started working on what became the XRP ledger, those were kind of the two first ideas. One of them was there's got to be something better than proof of work that doesn't like hand power to whoever has the cheapest electricity and whoever has the best ASICs. And the other idea was there has to be bridges, like Bitcoin or a cryptocurrency system can't be like its own walled garden. It has to have tools to interoperate with the rest of the world. And so as we started to build the XRP ledger, we built it as a multi-currency ledger and with a decentralized exchange. And we built it not based on proof of work, but based on what we would probably today call federated Byzantine agreement. But as we started to work on it, like we built it with those concepts, but then the next thing you start thinking about is like, okay, what is this good for? Because in the beginning, when we said, all right, let's throw out proof of work and let's replace it with something else, we didn't necessarily know what it would be good for because we didn't know what its characteristics would be. Like sometimes when you build something, you know exactly what you need. You have requirements. And other times you just have technology and you have to sort of see what the technology is good for. You know, like if you invented some new material, you found some new way to combine carbon with something, and you're like, okay, well, what's it good for? You know, is it light? Is it heavy? Is it cheap? Is it expensive? Is it strong? Is it weak? Is it, you know, you have to sort of find an application. And the application that we very quickly settled on was payments. And there's a reason for that. One of them is that it turns out Bitcoin was just starting, like Bitcoin pitched itself as peer-to-peer digital cash, which basically sounds a lot like payments. But one of the things that I think a lot of people quickly realized is that it really wasn't super great for payments. And that's why they kind of pivoted to a store of value story. So we focused on payments, which has somewhat different requirements. So one of them is fast and cheap, like completion of transactions. And the other thing that we noticed is that was just about when people were starting to think about using blockchain for everything, like applications like lending and DeFi and those sorts of things. They didn't call it DeFi back then, but smart contracts. We just kind of had those ideas. And one of the things that we realized is that everything depends on a payment. Like if you want to do security settlement or lending or trade finance, there's going to be, if I'm buying stock, I'm also paying for that stock. And if I'm selling stock, I'm getting paid for that stock. If I'm lending money, the person who I'm lending the money to, I have to make a payment to them and they have to make payments back to me. So what we realized is that like if you didn't have good payments, none of that other stuff would work. And so the focus very, very quickly became payments. We still have a multi-currency ledger. A lot of people don't know this, but we had the first decentralized exchange functional in 2012, and it's been running ever since. And something like $8 million a day of like cross-currency payments take place on the XRP ledger. So it's a public blockchain where you can move assets denominated in any currency from anywhere in the world and have finality in just a few seconds.
Wow. Okay. Thank you for that background. And I guess, as I understand it, the focus on XRP, is at least as it relates to Ripple, is on more B2B type of payments and settlement. Can you explain that a little bit in terms of then as you were focusing on payments, how you then determine that what XRP's role would be exactly in what I believe is now mostly cross-border settlement payments?
Yeah,
if that's correct.
Yeah, Ripple initially focused on what we called the gateway model. So we had there's a multi-currency public blockchain, the XRP ledger, and we kind of promoted its multi-currency and decentralized exchange features. And then a community started to form around those, and those started to grow on their own. And people were using them for things like remittance, and Ripple had nothing to do, like almost nothing. I mean, we encouraged companies to interact with the ledger, but then all of these like little projects built up, including millions of dollars a day in remittances on cross-currency transactions right on the ledger. And so what we started to focus on is what can Ripple do that's like unique to Ripple, that a community can't do, that won't happen on its own. We don't want to compete with people who are building exciting projects on the XRP ledger. Like that doesn't make any sense. We don't want to be like destructive of the ecosystem we're trying to encourage. But what we do want is we want to figure out, well, what we can do that like is not going to happen on its own and that's unique. And what we realized is that if you want to grow a technology, there's kind of like a grassroots bottom-up approach, and that was happening for XRP just as it was happening for Bitcoin. But there wasn't really a sort of top-down institutional approach. Today, I mean, that's pretty mature and happening all throughout the ecosystem. I mean, Uphold is an example of like a well-organized company in the cryptocurrency space. But there really weren't no bank would even talk about a cryptocurrency. Nobody would go to a bank and ask, what's your cryptocurrency strategy? Back then, they'd be like, oh, we wouldn't touch those things. I mean, they might as well, at that time, they might have been, from a bank's point of view, they might have been like drugs or guns or something. I mean, they were considered like, bad and for criminals and everything. It was early. And so what we realized is that it made sense for institutions to use them, particularly in international payments, because international payments tend to be bad. Particularly things like remittances, like US to Mexico, where you have high volume, low value, high fees. And the other interesting thing about that particular type of payment is the Mexican peso is pretty volatile. So having to pre-position Mexican pesos to make remittances work is expensive for remittance companies, and they pass those fees on to people who are some of the poorest people in the world. And so we started to focus on getting institutions to use digital assets to improve things like remittances and international payments, areas that are not well served. Because if you're trying to fix something that's already really, like US to Euro business to business payments are great. You'd have to be fantastic to beat out, that experience. But if you've ever sent money to someone in another country, particularly countries like Mexico or the Philippines, it's not a great experience. And so you don't have to be all that good to be a lot better, and you don't have to be all that cheap to be a lot. You can be pretty expensive and still be a lot cheaper. I mean, compared to like the payments in like US to euro. So what Ripple focused on was driving institutional adoption, which required things like regulatory engagement and building the tools. The first problem that we ran into is that the lowest layers of the financial system date to the 70s. They, believe it or not, like they still have procedures that are based on the idea that if the magnetic tape that has the payments is on the payment machine, it can't also be in the settlement machine. And someone at the end of the business day is going to take the tape from the payment machine to the settlement machine. And this separation of settlement and payment is a very, very big deal. Let me just explain it briefly, just for people who don't understand the difference. Like if you go to a restaurant and you pay with your credit card, they let you leave and they don't call the police that you stole the food when you pay with the credit card. But you still have to pay your credit card bill. And the credit card company or some bank somewhere still has to wire money to the restaurant. So the payment has completed, but it hasn't settled. And this sometimes the bifurcation of payment and settlement makes great sense. If settlement is slow and expensive, we don't want to wait 3 business days before I leave a restaurant and have paid them. Like that makes no sense. So that bifurcation has a logical historical reason, both technically and sort of in the plumbing of the financial system. But if payment and settlement are completely separated, there's a lot of things you can't do. For one thing, you can't know that a payment will succeed. Like when I go to the restaurant and I make a payment, they don't know if I'm going to pay my bill. And they don't know, I mean, they trust their bank, but they don't know at the time I leave that like the bank is going to pay them. And that creates some interesting problems with like, what is the fee going to be? So if I'm sending money from the United States to, let's say, someone in Europe, if we don't know the path the money's going to take, we don't know what the fee is going to be. We don't know who's going to charge what. And so what Ripple realized is that like that problem, that separation of payment and settlement, and the fact that the financial system is based on ancient technologies makes it hard to use a digital asset in international payments and remittances. So we set out to solve that problem as a company. And that's something that the community, you can't do that as a grassroots effort, right? You can't put software in banks that's in their payment flows. Like that takes an engineering team and 24/7 support and code that passes external audits. And so that was something that we felt that only we could do, that we thought made a lot of sense for Ripple to pursue as a company. So today, most of Ripple is still pursuing enterprise adoption of payment solutions that allow settlement with a digital asset. About 20% of the transactions on RippleNet use on-demand liquidity, use XRP as the digital asset to settle those payments. And we're pursuing that while we're also sort of encouraging the community to build projects around XRP. And of course, there's any number of other companies that are building things that are not, what Ripple's building.
Excellent. That's really great. So now, on the consumer side, what are some of the projects or efforts that you're seeing kind of taking hold or getting some traction? Anything to highlight there that gets you excited?
I think one of the most interesting things is like direct consumer adoption. That's like Ripple's kind of working on that top-down institutional approach. There are other companies that are working on bringing crypto to institutions, but I think the exciting part, at least like for most people, is the sort of bottom-up approach, like getting everybody to use cryptocurrency for everything. And that's a slow process. That's like you kind of look at the internet, and the internet was piddling around for a long time, being used in universities and government and military, and a small number of power users like, hey, this is pretty cool. Like I can send an email, and the mail gets there in seconds, and it doesn't cost me 18 cents for a stamp or whatever. That's kind of the stage we're in. Companies that are trying to drive that mass adoption. I think my favorite one is Coil. And Coil is a project that was started by Stephen Thomas, the person who I replaced, who left as CTO to start Coil, and who when I took over the role. And what they're doing is they're solving a problem that's a really annoying problem, which is advertisements. If you get paid by advertisements, it sucks. And if most people would love to be able to pay for content and not see advertising. And one of the most important things about advertising that a lot of people don't realize is that most of the privacy issues on the internet are caused by advertising. So if I go to a website and I'm not paying for that website, so I go to a newspaper or something and I'm not a subscriber, the amount of money they get for me depends on how much they know about me. If they just show me an ad just because I'm some person browsing their website, that's going to be a tiny fraction of a penny. But if they know I live in California, if they know I'm male, if they know I'm over 50 years old, if they know I'm married, if they know I'm Jewish, if they know, I live in Northern California, the more they know about me, the more money they can get for that ad. And you probably notice that when you browse the internet, you see ads that are creepily related to things that you've recently done, right? Like someone asks you a question about some car and you're like, oh, I don't know about that. Let me look it up. Oh yeah, they're based in Germany. And then you get ads for that car company for the rest of your freaking life. And the reason for that is because if I know that you researched a particular car company, I can get more money for the ads that I show you because they're more targeted and people are willing to pay more money for more targeted ads. And what Coil's doing is Coil set up a decentralized system based on open standards that allows people who browse the web to pay for content and people who put up websites to be able to get paid for content. And so instead, like you go to Wikipedia, instead of seeing like, please donate, you see, thank you for being a supporter. And you feel good about that. And they don't have to show you ads and they don't have to violate your privacy. And what's nice about this is that it's a really good fit between what the technology is capable of doing and sort of a real world problem. And I think the most interesting thing is that it is a true micropayment system. So they made more than 1 billion payments last year with an average amount of a tiny, tiny fraction of a penny. And that I think could be one of the most dramatic changes in like the financial universe. If you can make a payment of a tiny, tiny fraction of a penny in a second globally, that changes the way people think about payments. The same way email, if we were talking about email in the 90s, I might say like, maybe 50% of letters could be email instead. But of course, that's totally wrong. We don't use email at all the way we use mail, right? The fact that it's so fast and so cheap means that it's a completely different product with completely different applications. If you looked at your email, 99.9% of them would be things that would never be a letter. And so if payments could be that small and that cheap, I think you would see that same kind of explosion of completely new use cases. And we have the technologies to do that. I mean, like Coil's doing it. And so that could be a complete game changer for the way people think about payments. And the annoying thing is, like, if you ask me to give examples of how that could be transformative, it's very hard to do. It's the same thing. Like if you asked me for examples in the early 90s of like how people would use email, in 20 years, I would have given you really dumb answers. Like you get examples like, I walk up to a building and they have like a revolving door that's like the deluxe door and my phone just automatically pays for the door. Like that seems really dumb. Or you're driving down the road and you're in a hurry to get somewhere and you like pay the car in front of you to change lanes. Just like those are terrible examples. And it's kind of embarrassing that, but if I pitched YouTube to you in 2000, I said, what would people use it for? And you said, they'll watch cat videos on demand. Like you never would. I would laugh at you and thought that's ridiculous, but that's actually thinking that is almost the best description of what people use YouTube for. So what I find exciting is building new plumbing, building new lowest layer technologies like email was, like the internet was, and I would argue micropayments are, public blockchains are, and then figuring out what people will use them for is more almost an observational thing. It's like it's completely impossible to predict. But companies like Coil that are building, like solving real world problems with these new technologies are just super exciting. And that is a mass adoption thing. Like you can subscribe to Coil, you can pay them something like $5 a month, and they will stream money at all the websites you go to. So as you browse around the web, you'll see like content that's just for Coil subscribers. But really what's happening is you could create a competitor to Coil and you could stream money at websites too. So it is an open system, and you don't have to sign up with. You want your website to accept money from people who like browse using Coil. You don't sign up with Coil. You sign up with anyone who can accept inbound interledger payments, and then people just know that your website accepts payments. So it's a true open ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean that's really where the rubber meets the road, right? The technology's there, but there's got to be that spark that really gets everything going. And how it's going to be, how that fire is going to get going is I think still a question, and it's still really early days.
Yeah.
Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about don't want to talk too much about it, but regulation and kind of what's going on Currently, the environment, obviously, there's more regulation, but maybe some people would say that there's more clarity, which kind of helps with the choices that are being made. And now, obviously, with the Biden administration coming in, and what's your general feeling about? I guess I've pointed to in the United States to regulation in the U.S. and elsewhere as it relates to XRP.
Well, the U.S. has very unclear rules. It's not so much bad regulation, like bad rules are one thing because you can advocate that they be changed and you can maybe come up with workarounds. But the problem is that the rules are sort of applied inconsistently and are vague and very difficult to understand. And the United States has an unfortunate tendency of regulators that don't give clear answers to questions and then a year later go to a business and say, you should have realized 3 years ago that what you were doing wasn't compliant with the regulations, when all that time you were completely open and transparent and asking the regulators, we read the regulations this way, are we right? The other annoying thing in the US is you not only have between 8 and 12 federal regulators that are arguing over exactly where cryptocurrencies fall in their jurisdiction. Obviously the SEC is the 30-pound gorilla or whatever, but I mean, there's also the CFTC and the OCC and many other regulators. And also many of the states have been setting up their own regulation. And so if you want to do business in all of the states, you have to look at the regulations in all of the states that have them. And I applaud the state efforts to reduce regulatory uncertainty by coming up with regulatory frameworks. The problem is if you have 50 regulators, one in each state, plus 8 federal regulators or more, all coming up with their own rules, that's going to drive innovation out of the United States. And the United States has historically been the leader in tech innovation, but with blockchain and digital assets, there's no regulatory framework. And so I think that's strangling innovation and pushing it out of the country. And an analogy that I would use is if you imagine in the early days of the internet, there were regulatory issues with the internet. Information moving across borders is we think happens every day. We don't think about the idea of a government trying to put some sort of a control on information moving across borders, kind of ridiculous today. But before the internet, there were controls on movement of things like information. I'm not saying regulators should back off. There are scams, and I mean, there's bad things that can happen to consumers, exit scams from companies. I mean, there's all kinds of things that need to be regulated. I don't deny that. But can you imagine if regulators in the United States in the early days of the internet said this is going to allow information to move without control. We won't be able to have border controls on information. People are radicalizing terrorists and they're violating copyright and stealing intellectual property. We're just not going to allow the internet in the United States. If you look at companies like Microsoft and Apple and Google, and I mean, I could go on and on, Amazon, these are US powerhouse international companies that thrived in the United States because the United States embraced the internet. And there were regulatory frameworks that helped the growth of the internet. And I think there's a good parallel with cryptocurrency here, because if the United States pushes cryptocurrency away, it's not going to just disappear. It's going to move to Singapore, and it's going to move to the European Union and Switzerland, and it's going to move to India. And what that's going to mean is that the future powerhouses of the new financial system won't be U.S. companies. And I think that would be a huge loss for the United States. One of the things that Ripple did very early is the tendency for a company that's doing something like we're doing would have been to sort of try to fly under the radar and sort of comply with the rules in their technically oh no, that rule doesn't apply to us because we have this decentralized thing, and so we don't need to follow that rule. There's 2 problems with that. One of them is first of all, the rules could be changed to make things worse for you, and they will be if you do things like that, if you avoid the regulations. But if regulators have legitimate interests, money laundering and terrorist financing and drug money and all kinds of other people hiding money overseas, tax evasion, they have all kinds of legitimate concerns, and they'll do what they have to address those concerns. So you can't just say, oh, technically I'm complying with the rules, I'll just change the rules and put you out of business. You don't want that. And the other thing is that if the first time you encounter a regulator is when something terrible happens, God forbid some terrorist uses XRP to fund their operation or any other cryptocurrency like that, the last thing you want is your first encounter with regulators to be when something terrible happens, and they just want to they just want this thing to go away. Like, you want to establish ahead of time with the regulators so that they know who you are and what you're doing. And so when something like this happens, you're an ally, not the adversary. It's like, okay, like, what can we do to stop things like this from happening? So, I don't know what else to say. It's kind of a little bit frustrating because, we're a U.S. company. Ripple's a U.S. company. Like, XRP Ledger is global, and so from an XRP standpoint, it's just that it's a drag on institutional adoption, that there's a lack of certainty. One of the nice things from Ripple's point of view is that using XRP for on-demand liquidity is pretty easy for regulators to understand, and there isn't a consumer protection issue, because if it's a remittance, the remittance might be U.S. dollars to Mexican pesos. The XRP is sort of deep in the machine. And regulators will generally trust institutions to sort of like not, to take the risk of sort of funds in flight. But the big problem is trying to bring consumer adoption. It's just very, very difficult in the United States, particularly.
What about the advent of stablecoins? So, that's, I wouldn't say it's a new thing, but it certainly stablecoins aren't what they are today when you guys developed XRP, and some of the interoperability aspects of that you worked on with XRP Ledger seem to be encompassed in stablecoins in some way. And do you see that as competition, or do you see that as just complementary, moving, all boats rising with a higher tide type of thing, or how do you view that?
Yeah, there's a lot of different things I could say, but I'll start by pointing out that a stablecoin is pegged to something, like it's pegged to a currency. So if you're in the US, a euro stablecoin is a semi-stablecoin, and if you're in Europe, a US stablecoin is a semi-stablecoin. So if the pitch of a stablecoin is that it's absolutely stable, it is for some group of people. And so what you could have is a world where you have a USD stablecoin, and a euro stablecoin, and a yuan stablecoin, and a rupee stablecoin, and so on. And I think that's useful, because one of the problems that you have with digital assets, and I'm sure like at Uphold, I don't have to tell you about this, but there's sort of a semantic mismatch between the way digital assets work and the way the conventional financial system works. If I send you money to buy Bitcoin, let's say, once you give me the Bitcoin, it's gone. But there's ways that I might be able to reverse that transfer, or claim that my payment to you wasn't authorized by the account holder. There's sort of a mismatch. We call it we analogize it like an impedance mismatch for old people who understand, radio communications. They don't fit very well. And so stable coins fit much better. And there's two reasons why I think they're complementary. So one of them is you can't force your customers to accept something that doesn't match what their use case and their needs. You just can't. You can't tell a customer like let's say you love Bitcoin, so you tell your customers you're going to use Bitcoin for everything. Well, you're not going to have any customers, because Bitcoin doesn't do everything, right? Like, you're not going to have customers. The better the customer experience, the more customers you're going to have. Like, an analogy I might use is that it doesn't help Twitter to make other things on the internet worse, because the reason every single one of us probably has a smartphone within reach that we can use to post things to Twitter is because of Twitter's competitors. Like, Twitter didn't put that phone in our hands, right? It's because in the old days, people they like Google, and even going back to GeoCities and MySpace, made the internet popular and drove cell phone adoption. And a great ecosystem will put the tools for people to use XRP and use other digital assets in people's hands. So there has to be a thriving ecosystem. There has to be something for everyone. So that, the reason that every one of us carries a smartphone around is because there's something in a smartphone for everyone. Whatever you are, whatever you want, there's something that you can do with that phone that's useful to you. And so that ecosystem has just exploded. The other thing is that if there's not going to be one world stablecoin, the world is not going to adopt the dollar. If anything, it's sort of moving into a more fragmented direction. So I think there's an opportunity for digital assets like XRP to act as sort of the lubrication between stablecoins, as sort of the settlement. So if you imagine a U.S. settlement hub with businesses that pay their bills in U.S. dollars and get paid in U.S. dollars, and so they want sort of a dollar-denominated stablecoin. And then you might have a hub in China that's using some stablecoin that's pegged to the yuan. You need an asset that can sort of move between those two worlds that's kind of neutral. And so I think digital assets like XRP can position themselves as sort of those neutral assets. One pitch that I think could work is If there's not going to be one world currency, and like the United States probably understands that they're not going to get the whole world to use the dollar, and I'm sure like China understands they're not going to get the whole world to use their currency. It may make more sense to have a currency that nobody can control than to have like a currency controlled by your geopolitical adversaries. And so it could be that everybody could settle on an asset that nobody can control. This is the same pitch Ripple makes to banks. So when we go to a bank, and you might think, well, why wouldn't a big bank want a system built by big banks and controlled by big banks that runs to make everything great for big banks? Well, there's a lot of banks that are not big banks. Like when I say big banks to most people, they think every bank's a big bank. Like there's really a small bank? Well, yeah. Like if you say to someone in the banking business, big bank, they think, JP Morgan Chase, HSBC, Credit Suisse, Deutsche Bank. It's not a long list, right? If I asked you to keep going with that list, you'd stop very, very soon. But there's thousands of banks. And so the ecosystem is not as the banks are not all the same.
Yeah, agreed. And you're actually heading in a direction that I kind of wanted. We're coming up at the end of the session. I've got one more question after this, but you made a comment earlier about it might be ridiculous to if somebody had predicted what the internet would look like, some of the proclamations that would be made, et cetera. But you are recognized as one of the great minds in our industry. So it would be great just to hear you wax on a little bit about where things in your mind may go. Let's say from a consumer standpoint, with cryptocurrency in 10 years. What is a state of play vis-a-vis how we pay for things today? In the future, from your perspective?
Well, I think we're going to see a kind of meet in the middle. So we're going to see continued institutional adoption, which is exciting. It's exciting when it's transformative for users, and that's kind of hard, because when you get adoption from a really big company, they don't generally push the benefits down to their users, and when we get adoption from a small company, it doesn't make like major waves. So the direct to consumer is kind of the interesting space. And I think two trends that I think you're going to see are explosion of smaller and smaller, faster and faster, and cheaper payments. And I think that's going to be completely transformative to the way people think about payments. I would try to make predictions, but like I said, it's virtually impossible. One analogy I use, which again is terrible, is most people get paid roughly every 2 weeks. And the reason for that is because payments are expensive and have administrative overhead. Like you could imagine a world where as you're working, money is just being streamed at you, and you don't have to worry about, on what day of the month does this payment go out, or, but it's hard to say how that will be transformative. But I think like ubiquitous interconnectivity of data has changed the world. You walk up to someone's house and ring the doorbell, and they say, "Oh, David, you come by to drop off what, so and so. Let me open the door for you." And like that all takes place over the internet, but you don't think of it. They may not be home, and that's all automated, but you don't think of that as like the internet. It just works nicely for you. Like the door just opens, and you can just talk to the person. And so that sort of payments could become that same sort of thing where it's just available everywhere. It's hard to know how. Like if I wanted to pay you, email is everything, payments aren't. Like if I want to pay you, if I want to send you an email, I ask you your email address, and then I know I can send you an email and it just works. Like we have nothing like that in payments, right? I'd be like, do you have Venmo? Do you have Cash App? Do you have PayPal? Oh, I think I have PayPal, but I don't have any money in my PayPal. It's a mess, right? So I think that sort of ubiquitous payments that just work, I think is going to be transformative for consumers. The other thing that I think could happen in 10 years is more tokenization of things, which means better asset freedom. So I have pretty good access to hold whatever assets I want. Like I have a brokerage account and I have Forex accounts, and if I want exposure to the euro, I can have it. And if I want to buy stocks, I can very easily do it. But a lot of people don't have those options. I get paid in US dollars. It's a pretty decent currency. I'm pretty happy to hold US dollars. But imagine if I didn't have those things. Imagine if I got paid in Mexican pesos, which not so great to hold. And imagine if I didn't have access to foreign currencies, and I didn't have access to, equity, the equities market. That kind of sucks. What we could have is tokenization of just about everything. So someone, a Mexican farmer gets paid in Mexican pesos, but he's holding gold. Just automatically, he's holding gold. And if he thinks about like his portfolio, small might be big, but he's like, you know what? there's this real estate investment trust in the Seychelles Islands that I really think is exciting, and he buys a very small share of that, and he holds it like in a sort of like this sort of tokenization of everything. And you need great payments for that to happen. Like that, you can't, the security settlement of him buying like that piece of a real estate investment trust can't work if he can't pay for it. You know, and it's not, he's not going to hold it if he can't sell it, if he needs money to buy groceries. This idea of like having asset freedom and anybody at any level being able to hold whatever financial assets they want ideally in some kind of a decentralized system. So that's the other thing that this is the vision that first inspired me, I think. And I think in 10 years we can get there, which is right now, if I want to make payments somewhere, I'll typically use a payment provider who's pre-positioned money in the place where I need to make payments. So if I want to make payments to Malaysia, I'll find someone who's got money in Malaysia, some company whose business practice keeps money in Malaysia, so they can deliver the payment immediately when I want to make it. Or I'll have to put my own money in Malaysia, which is annoying, or it'll take days to get there, right? So that pre-positioning. But there's probably someone who has money in Malaysia just because that's where they keep their money. Like at zero cost, they have money in Malaysia because that's what they do. So this vision that I've had is this sort of open market for liquidity that anybody can contribute to and draw off of. So if I need to make a payment in Malaysia and there's someone who has money in Malaysia, I can find the person who's willing to offer me that money at the lowest possible price. And we can settle instantly and do that all trustlessly. So that sort of trustless financial system that enables anybody to hold any asset that they want, and ubiquitous payments, and being able to hold an interest in any going concern anywhere, like that kind of open financial system is what I think we could be there in 10 years. I hate to make time frame because, you know, people ask me, you know, how's it been going? Has it been going faster than you thought or slower than you thought? And I swear, some days I feel like we spend years and we don't get anywhere. And other days I feel like the world is changing so fast. Like, it's amazing how far we've come. And I think there's truth to both. I think some things are easier than we thought. Some things are a lot harder than we thought. So I hate to like bound predictions with time, but I think that's the direction that we're all trying to go.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I share your thoughts on Coil and streaming payments. Be remiss in not mentioning that, you know, we at Uphold support and work with Coil and streaming payments. So if you're a publisher, you can receive these streaming payments real time. And so I've experienced that myself, and it's really, really cool, right? Like the notion of somebody on your website who's viewing your content, and then as they're viewing the content, you're receiving those payments in real time. It's kind of that experience, you know, I felt when, you know, I first took an Uber, right? And it was like, wow, that's really cool. I didn't have to pull out my card. I didn't have to do really anything. It all just sort of magically happened in the background. So I agree. I think that's one of the key pieces that's going to move things forward. And then on the second front, absolutely, you know, I think we at Uphold share that vision of everything can be digitized and should be held, be able to access, you know, globally, et cetera, et cetera. And I think one of the big challenges, which you touched upon, which people tend to forget about, they like to think about, okay, the nice clean world where, you know, you have all of this stuff, but it's really the first mile, last mile problem. And the fact that, you know, we all work, you know, we all have bills to pay, we all need to eat. And so these things, you know, are critical in figuring out, you know, how do you connect kind of those necessities and where we are today with this new world of payments and being able to hold all sorts of digital assets and so forth. So at Uphold, that's what we're spending a lot of time on. So want to kind of close with, and I appreciate you going over, I think we're over by about 10 minutes, but maybe what we can close with, we did ask for a bunch of questions ahead of time, and a lot of them from users had to do with the Spark token, you know, and while I know you don't represent the Spark token, you obviously would have, you know, more insights than me, for instance, on that project and how it relates to XRP. If you could just comment on that, I think probably the audience, you know, ears would be perked.
Yeah, so I'm at the Flare team, formerly under the Ripple Spring effort, which was like a venture capital kind of arm at the time. Mm-hmm. We invested in them a few years ago. I'm very impressed with what they're doing. Flare has built a network using different pieces that they took from different blockchains. Ethereum smart contracts, Avalanche consensus, and XRP settlement. And what they're bringing to the XRP world is essentially a DeFi solution. So they have a fast and reliable settlement mechanism, XRP, and they have ways to essentially bring Ethereum-style smart contracts to the XRP world. They've gotten a lot of exchanges to support their airdrop, which I think is really impressive. That's a very difficult thing to do, and that's going to make it easier for people to just for their token to be sort of distributed widely, which I think helps with keeping the system decentralized and helps with, you know, keeping the system reliable. It is fantastic to see companies building systems that add utility to XRP, and I think that the ability to use XRP directly in smart contracts is going to be tremendously useful.
Thank you. Well, listen, huge pleasure to finally meet you. I guess I could say in person or digitally, and really appreciate your time. Really to hear your perspectives. So I think at this point we will sign off. And again, thank you for all of your insights. Much appreciated, and hopefully we'll see you on the other side of this pandemic and can meet in person sometime.
Thanks for filling in for JP, Robin, and thanks to Uphold for holding the webinar. Have a good day.
Alrighty, guys. Thank you guys so much for tuning in for the David Schwartz webinar with Uphold. Appreciate everybody who tuned in, the new viewers. Thanks so much for the 51 likes. Unreal, you guys. And thanks for any new subs. Once again, thank you, Johnny Morales, for that $5 donation. You're awesome, my man. I'll see you guys in the next video. Stay tuned. All right. Adios.